Thank you very much, everybody. Welcome to the September meeting of the Community Outcomes meeting that the Mayor and I use to give an opportunity to the public to watch how we hold the police to account for delivery of the police and crime plan and a safe and effective service to you, the public. We've got a few. First of all, we'll just do welcome and introduction. So my name's Alison Lowe, I'm the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime for West Yorkshire, and I'm joined by
Julie Reid, Head of Policing and Crime in the Mayor's Policing and Crime team.
John Robbins, Chief Constable, West Yorkshire.
Catherine Johnson, Assistant Chief Officer, West Yorkshire Police.
Damien Miller, Assistant Chief Constable, West Yorkshire Police.
Rush Hughes, Chief Superintendent, West Yorkshire Police.
And then Deputy Mayor will bring different people in for different papers, if that's okay, and introduce them at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got apologies from the Mayor, Tracy Brabin. So we will move to the next item, which is notes of the previous meeting held on the 18th of June. Everybody happy that those notes were true record?
Yes, thank you.
Any matters arising?
Not from us, thank you.
No. So we'll move then to announcements of the Mayor, myself, or the Chief Constable, and we'd just like to raise the events in Hare Hills, and wanted to say how pleased we were that the events did not lead to any serious harm of any member of the public. We did discuss the disorder at the Police and Crime panel last Friday, and the Chief Constable was able to update those present with the facts that are known to date, and that piece of work is still ongoing and is likely to be ongoing for a considerable amount of time. The Mayor will be holding another Community Outcomes meeting in November, where we will be asking questions that she is going to co-produce with the community of Hare Hills, so that we can understand what lessons have been learned so far, what we understand has happened so far, because obviously by November the full lessons learned will not be known, but we wanted to give the public an opportunity to get as much information as possible, and for the communities of Hare Hills to ask those questions. Another item to contribute today is the consultation around the police and crime plan. As the Mayor has been re-elected, she has to write a new police and crime plan, and there's currently a consultation arrangement underway called Tell Tracy. There is an online survey which we do urge members of the public to complete, because the police and crime plan contains the priorities of the public, and if the things that you're passionate about are not in the plan, then we won't be holding the police to account for delivery of those priorities on your behalf. We'll be holding them to account for the priorities that other people have told us about. So it's a really important opportunity for you to get the things that matter to you really high up there in that plan. We're also looking to develop a serious violence strategy, which was one of the pledges that the Mayor made in her election manifesto. And so the consultation not just captures the police and crime plan, but also the beginnings of the consultation process for the development of that strategy. The serious violence strategy will take a longer time to complete, because we want to have a long, detailed and honest conversation with the public of West Yorkshire about what the current situation is and how all the different partners and stakeholders think that we can make an impact on the scourge of serious violence. So we're taking our time doing it properly. So there'll be lots of opportunities to come back on that, but we hope that you'll partake of the consultation exercise that's currently live. Then finally, wanted to update on the Mayor's Safer Communities Fund awards. Twice a year, we receive monies from West Yorkshire Police through their Economic Crime Unit, who secure funding through Police Proceeds of Crime Act. So those criminals who are blighting our communities and enriching themselves, that money is identified by the Economic Crime Unit and taken back from them. All their assets are sold, and some of that money comes back into West Yorkshire and is given to the communities that have been harmed. And the brilliant news is that last week we were able to fund 68 different projects to the tune of over £581,000. And we had a great celebration of all those organisations that contribute to delivery of the Mayor's Policing Crime Plan and who make a real difference in the communities that they are serving. We also were really delighted that we were able to fund 20 clear hold build projects. So clear hold build is a methodology to reduce serious organised criminality, eliminate hopefully in time serious organised criminality in our communities, and the police have piloted these arrangements nationally, and they're having an enormous impact on the communities of West Yorkshire. Currently we've got live projects in Kirklees, 2 in Bradford and 1 in Hare Hills in Leeds, and we're beginning to see some massive improvements in those areas where Clear Hold Build is operating. So 20 organisations are now going to be helping with the build phase of that operation, and hopefully we'll be able to see the impact that they've had in the coming months. So that was all I have to say, except that there will be another Mayor Safe Communities Fund opening in November, 11th of November, and this time the police have been able to secure for us the enormous amount of £1 million, and so more information about that fund will come out in the coming months. Thank you. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Not today, thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much. So we'll go straight on then to the main items on the agenda. All the papers are public and they've been published on our website, so anyone who's watching live will be able to have a look at those papers as we're discussing them, because we don't go into lots and lots of detail. But I'm going to go to the first exception paper, which is digital policing, and I understand that ACO Catherine Johnson is going to respond to that paper.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. So we've set out within the paper how our West Yorkshire Police digital strategy meets that of the National Policing Strategy, and some of the challenges, the key issues that we face for the future, not least funding all the requirements that we've got. We face challenges around security of the systems, around data, for which we have an annual assessment. It's called a SIAP assessment, which is a security assessment in policing that's done independently, for which we then take an action plan and we take that to our governance, to the Strategic Oversight Board. Another big challenge is around data and how we use that in the management of integration of systems. And with our data warehouse, the more data that we're managing to get through into the warehouse to be able to use across systems and really help benefit from the fact that integration is quite tricky between systems, but if you're putting it in the warehouse and then feeding and reporting through, we're finding that we're able to do much more live time reporting to increase our operational efficiency. Another major challenge, of course, is the recruitment and retention of skills. So obviously in West Yorkshire we face challenges of other sectors within Leeds and the surrounding areas that take a significant amount of digital skills from public sector organisations. So we've lost a few of our key members of staff to the banking industry in recent years. So it's a real challenge to be able to maintain the skills and capabilities of a changing skill set really within the public sector. But we do think that we provide a very exciting working environment, and our staff feel valued, and really feel the kind of community cause that they're doing with policing, and I think that's a big plus for us to be able to retain some of the staff. And then fourthly, the ever-growing challenges around supplier management. There's a shrinking sector really for some of the key providers for the digital world. Obviously you're aware of the big monopolies that we have. So for example in Microsoft we have very little control over our licensing costs. So we face significantly increasing challenges around the funding of our IT capabilities, not just from an infrastructure side but from the day-to-day, everybody uses the software side.
Thanks very much. So we've got a few questions for you. You've already started to outline some of the challenges. So what are the additional challenges and risks to the future of IT in policing here in West Yorkshire?
I do think the security of the systems will continue to be a growing risk, and I mentioned around the SIAP assessment, and we nationally are one of the highest scoring forces. We will be subject to another assessment next year, and we're hoping to reach level 3, there's 5 levels. But it is something that we spend a lot of time on, and we report through our governance board, through the strategic oversight board. Obviously we've got a bit of a change in platform that everybody's facing around moving to the cloud environment. So that'll be a big challenge for us in the future. And just as much of a technical challenge, it will be a cultural kind of challenge as well, to get people used to accessing through the cloud. Hopefully they won't notice much difference, but in terms of just having access to everything you want immediately, there'll be a slight shift in that because of the cost of moving down that route.
Is that also a risk?
Yeah.
Moving to the cloud?
Yeah, there's the technical challenge, but then there's also the security, that arguably these massive cloud providers will have more resources to maintain a secure network than perhaps we do. So it's a risk and it's an opportunity, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. Question 2 then. In terms of improving the victim experience, can you say a bit more about how current and future investment will better support victims here in West Yorkshire?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had a huge focus on investing in making our contact easier using technology with the public. So through initial contact and the new telephony system, which has made it, well, they've certainly shaved off some of the response time on the 999 101 through the system, as well as through additional resources going into that area. We've put investment into new developments such as telephone witness statements, whereby it's more easier to access both for the officers but also for the witnesses to be able to have opportunities to give statements over the telephone rather than in person. You will have heard about the new teams we've set up with the rapid video response, whereby using Good Sam you can have much more in-person interaction but quickly with members of the public or people who are requiring service. And there's also the remote response teams, so we're able to use that Good Sam technology for remote response, which will be a growing area for the organisation. But there's other areas like the crime update function, which we're now seeing 1,000 uses per month. So clearly that's really good for taking demand out the call centre, but it's also really good for the people who need a quick update and could just do that themselves and get it.
Yeah, that's amazing, that last one, because that really impacts on satisfaction. So
yeah, so they're all the kind of in-train current programmes, and then obviously there's the customer relationship management solution that we will overlay over the telephony system to be able to look at our existing systems and see what information we already have about that member of the public that's contacting us to be able to hopefully provide a better service.
yeah, that's good. So we look forward to that being introduced and tested, and I'm sure there'll be some teething problems as with the JAR system.
Yes.
Yeah. On page 4, the report talks about the investment and exploitation of software robotics to reduce the admin burden over the last 2 years, which has resulted in West Yorkshire becoming one of the leading forces to deploy and exploit robotics. Can you explain a bit more about this and share any examples?
Yeah, so we've got a small team that we set up as a pilot. It started in November 2021, and we had an external organisation assisting us, and we were doing some proof of concepts around having digital workers who effectively are being programmed to do any job that works on rules. So they're not using any judgment, there's no influence to them, they are being programmed to do exactly what they're being programmed to do. So typically an administrative task. So one of the ones that's saved a lot of time within the organisation is the filed on first submission, whereby the digital worker is doing all the administrative tasks that would ordinarily be done by a member of our staff, who can then use their time to be given a more kind of value-add service.
National Productivity Review, is that part of that, or
No,
did
we've
you
started
start that
this
yourself?
sometime before the productivity review, yeah. So the productivity review did have an update on our robotics processes, so we fed a lot of information into the productivity review around the processes that we've done to date. Because we've been at this for a couple of years now, we're one of the leading forces in a national group now that we're all looking at how you can use digital workers And obviously, if whatever we can do with digital workers, most other forces can as well. So we're sharing learning, sharing that expertise across forces to be able to come up with new areas which we can use as digital workers, and which is linked in closely to our priority-based budgeting process, where we've been looking for productivity savings. We have been looking where we can use digital workers.
Good. I look forward to hearing more about that.
So as long as it is, it comes into its effect with victims, where we're now in a position where it's automating the crime update back to victims and giving them the numbers so they know exactly what it is. It's doing some searches in and amongst crimes so they're not having to check telephone numbers and making sure there's no duplicates in there. It's kind of working on some of the hate crimes and modern day slavery crimes and other areas where we can start automating processes. And as Catherine says, there's no thinking and decision making in it, it's just a series of things. So we're trying to apply it to victim-based issues. And going back to the other developments that Catherine mentioned about sort of rapid response teams, that in some ways you can think, yes, I wish we were sending an officer to things, but where we're piloting that in Wakefield and Bradford, we're getting thousands of emails going back to people with more information and increases in satisfaction. And indeed, should have maybe mentioned that to the panel last week to say some of those are increasing the victim satisfaction experience.
I think I told that meeting before.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Yeah, because obviously I witnessed it in Wakefield. We went to go visit Wakefield and we saw that rapid response teams are having a really positive impact on the response times for the public, and so satisfaction are going up, I think 7%.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just have to hopefully and then looking at Peel, of course, the Peel report that's just been completed, it's just taking out the inconsistencies in that process, isn't it? Which I think will happen as it beds in. Well, so it's all really good news. Obviously, we always have a bit of anxiety about bias in processes and systems when you're introducing new technological innovation, and some communities may be concerned about these advancements. So what reassurance can you give to those communities? I hear that the robotics, for example, are not making judgments, which is good, because that's where it all starts going wrong. So anything else that you can tell us?
Yeah, exactly as you said, we've kind of put a big emphasis on investments in recent years in areas like robotics, where there is no judgment, so that in other areas, for example, like facial recognition, other forces can go first, and they can be a bit of a test area for areas where people have historically had concern, but there's certainly national reviews in those areas which we will learn from as we move forward. Every project that we have undergoes an equality and human rights assessment. Obviously we'll have the new external ethics committee as well, which will be a really useful forum for us to be able to run some of our developments past and get feedback before we do them.
Yeah, and obviously having been part of that recruitment, we've got really high calibre, hopefully well respected members of that panel that the public can feel some trust in. So we'll see how that one works out. Yeah, thank you.
So just generally on digital policing, it's an area that can gain so much for policing and for victims and for investigations. But as you well know, the challenge with all of this, there's no capital funding, or very little capital funding in proportion to the budget. So every time we talk about investing in these programmes and this sort of work, there's a real risk that investment is at the expense of frontline officers and staff. And so, nationally, there needs to be greater coordination and greater insight into public services to say, yeah, if we're going to progress in these areas, we need to be provided nationally with the capital to do the exploratory work, because all of these are expensive pieces of work, and it's just getting that balance right. Because I don't want to lose 10, 20 police officers on the street to start doing some of these processes, but it's trying to get that sweet point right. So we are working in collaboration with others where we can. We are making bids to nationally where we can. But I just looked for yours and the Mayor's support in that narrative that when we're provided our funding off the Home Office, there's hardly anything for anything other than people. It's as brutal as that.
Yeah, and coincidentally, there was a meeting of the Labour group of the APCC this morning, because we're hoping to meet the front bench, the Home Secretary on Thursday, and capital was one of the things that we raised as a priority for that meeting, because we understand that the productivity review is putting a lot of expectation on forces regarding technology, for example, AI, for example, but that they don't, I mean, notwithstanding all the ethical considerations, there is a cost which is not currently embedded within police forces, so you can't have your cake and eat it too. So yeah, these are definitely things that we are discussing at a national level and will continue to do so, and Association of Police and Crime Commissioner level, and we've got regular meetings now in with the policing minister where we can continue to raise these issues.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Obviously, if you want to leave, you're more than welcome. I know you're very busy. You can't move fast enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll go next then to Violence Against Women and Girls, which is a regular paper which we last discussed in February. ACC Miller will be responding. You might want to move across because the sun's moving. It's up to you.
I'll get a bit closer to the chief.
Yes. Why not?
Or on the hot seat.
Brilliant.
So anything you'd like to say by way of introduction?
Obviously the report's in advance, and obviously it'll be online for people to read. I think just picking out some of the real sort of good practice within there. We've now got 300 premises engaged in the Cut It Out campaign, and we're looking to engage that further in ethnic minority communities as well, to engage with hair and beauty colleges as well. The Mayor's Women's Safety Unit, we recently presented at a POLED conference to the schools, to the education sector, to focus on the safety of girls and male behaviour as well, because obviously we've got the POLED scheme, and that's free to all schools within West Yorkshire, so I would encourage anybody not signed up, please do so. And obviously the Safer Travel team, invested by obviously the Mayor, we've seen an 11% reduction in crime and ASB and a 10% reduction of incidents on the bus network as well, so real positive steps there.
That's really good to see. Yeah, brilliant. Can you say more about the nature and number of the bite-sized audits that will take place over the next 6 months, please?
Yeah, so we obviously continue to do audits of crimes to make sure that the investigations are to the highest standard, and more importantly also that we are looking after the victims' needs as well through that journey. So what the priorities are going to be, it's in line with the Mayor's Women and Safety Unit plans as well. So that's going to look at rape, serious sexual offences, domestic abuse, stalking, harassment and honour-based abuse and forced marriage. So what we'll do is we'll look at those crime types one at a time and basically work through those. And that's to basically ensure, as I say, that those investigations are the best and the highest quality that they can be, and is there any learning that we can take from that. What we're doing on this occasion, which we haven't done previously, what we're trying to do is further professionalise our approach to those audits as well. So we've also included in that speaking to key partners. So for example, we've spoken to the Honour-based Abuse Steering Group to say, right, how best can we look at honour-based abuse offences and what guidance and direction would you like to give us? And what we want to do is obviously extend that further to other groups. What we've also done is looking to further professionalise our approach. We're also going to look at non-contact sexual offences as well. So, for example, flashing, exposure type offences, to make sure that we're looking at those properly. So our first audit, we're going to look at rape and serious sexual offences on the first occasion, and that's going to replicate the deep dive that we did back in 2023, if you remember, as part of the Opsiteria work that we were undertaking, and that will kick off next month. The findings come back to the board that I chair, which is the Protecting Vulnerable People Board, so that will come back in October. And it will give us an early indication of how well we're adopting the Opsiteria principles. And I'll be more than happy to share those audits with you once we do those on each occasion, because obviously I have a chair at the Protecting Vulnerable Person Board anyway, but we can share those with you so you can hopefully see the best practice and the progress that we're making with regards to those investigations. Yeah,
that's really good. And obviously then we can look to incorporate that into some of the oversight that the Women's Safety Unit is bringing.
Yeah,
that's very good. Thank you. What have been the key changes in the professionalisation and standards of response to non-contact sexual offences. You've touched on this, and what educational package will be provided to officers regarding non-contact sexual offences?
Yeah, so the first point we did is we looked at non-contact sexual offences and how do they actually come through the organisation. And the starting point is obviously contact, and what we found with WebStorm or Storm, which is the system that we manage it through, there was multiple ways that non-contact sexual offences could be recorded, and what we wanted to do was tighten that funnel so we could actually identify them, otherwise they weren't being identified at an early stage. So the first point we've done is actually creating specific WebStorm codes so we can identify that as soon as the victim makes contact with us. So that identifies the call in the first instance, and what we then are able to do is individually flag each of those offences, because they're not massive numbers, and bring them to the attention of the hub commanders. So we have the 5 districts, 5 hub commanders, and they will come to their attention and they can identify what is the best response and prioritise those offences so they're dealt with early. What we've also created in the background of that is now a reporting function. So non-contact sexual offences, we've got a reporting function sat within the back, so it comes out on our daily crime performance report, which identifies patterns, but more importantly that then gives us the focus not only as a chief officer team but also as district senior leadership teams that can incorporate those in the daily meeting. I know the chief each day has it on his desk and will highlight issues if there's something on there, as he normally does with me, to scrutinise the world that obviously I've got control over. We've also had national guidance quite recently as well, because they've done a review of non-contact sexual offences, looked at how it's dealt with nationally and given recommendations to forces to adopt. We've taken those on board, we've adopted those principles. I'm pleased to say quite a few of those principles we already had in place and practice, but there was quite a bit of learning that we could take from there as well. So the next bit now is actually delivering the revised West Yorkshire Police Policy, because those recommendations, the audit work that we've done, we've now had to revise our West Yorkshire Police Policy. So that's taken place and that's going to be launched next month. So there's different things that we've got in train for the delivery of that. So first of all, there will be the internal campaign, which will be videos, intranet items with regards to identifying what the new policy is and what's the requirement of officers. But the key bit is actually the training to the frontline officers, because it's these individuals who are actually going out and speaking to the victims and witnesses, and it's how do we capture that best evidence. So we've developed a new training package, and that's going on to the force training cycle, which all patrol officers attend. And we're just about to bring a paper as well with regards to neighbourhood policing officers and how we train those in future as well. So they'll be part of that. The next bit of that as well, or at the same time, we then want to do the external launch as well. So we've been very good in the past at bringing issues to the public's attention, encouraging them to report incidents. And I think this is an area that actually goes quite underreported, if I'm perfectly honest. So what we're trying to do is do the launch event externally as well to encourage people to report the offences. And we want to use your October's Reclaim the Night as well as the sort of springboard to get that out into the public's domain, and really highlight the collaborative approach that we've got within West Yorkshire with our Women's Safety Unit as well.
I know that's really good news, and obviously the Reclaim the Night event is a really good opportunity to start that engagement. Brilliant. So moving on to the next questions, what have been the outcomes so far since piloting the stalking screening tool? But just wanted to say well done on the stalking protection orders, that the numbers are really starting to build now, which is really pleasing to see.
We're getting better, and we've still got quite a few in the pipeline as well.
As I saw, yes.
Right. This has been difficult, if I'm perfectly honest. So we started the pilot in Wakefield and Kirkleeds, and that pilot was for 6 months. And we were awaiting a formal national evaluation of that pilot, because obviously it was a national pilot. Unfortunately, there's been an issue with the funding for that nationally. And even though we're still in contact with the national lead, we are still waiting for the results of, go on then, what has been the result of that. The other issue that we had was the IT issue with it not working with our system. So quite early on in the pilot, we had to do quite an early quick fix with the IT system to try and get it working. And it wasn't brilliant, but it was a fix. But ultimately, what we need to do is build that into niche, which is obviously our crime system. So we are in conversation with the niche Minerva team to say how can we do that and how can we build it in. What we didn't want to do was obviously lose the momentum of the stalking screening tool, even though it was being difficult and didn't work with our system. So what we looked at is how could we take the best bits of that, use the understanding and the expertise that we've got in-house, and we created our own stalking risk assessment, which we've been piloting now in Kirkleeds. And that pilot is still ongoing. We haven't done the evaluation of that because we've not got to the end of that yet, but when the evaluation is concluded, because it's ours, we can do the evaluation, and again that will be brought back to the Protecting Vulnerable Peoples Board, and again I'm more than happy to share that evaluation with you. We've been using that, but also at the same time we've been doing our dash risk assessment as well, because for the domestic abuse side of things, to make sure that we've got both areas captured, because we don't just want to do one and not the other and miss something. So the work nationally is ongoing. We've got a stalking risk assessment internally, and what we would look to do is, if there isn't any further movement nationally, is launch that. As long as the evaluation comes back and is positive, which is early stages, is sounding good, we would do that whilst we're waiting for the national product to come online.
Right, okay, so obviously some work to do before we understand what impact it's having, but yeah, so I look forward to getting the evaluation when it's done. Are there plans to conduct staff surveys to monitor changes and improvements in staff burnout after we obviously were higher than the national average, and we know that it was something again that was raised in the Peel inspection?
Yeah, so when you look at that, if I just deal with the safeguarding world for what this paper is, because there's different bits which came out of the Peel report for other areas. The burnout was in relation to our safeguarding teams, and certainly in relation to our domestic abuse teams. So that was undertaken, the survey was undertaken before we did or implemented the safeguarding review number 2. What that review looked at was looking at a further increasing staffing. So I put extra PCs into the safeguarding departments, and I also put extra supervision and inspectors and sergeants into that department as well, with a viewpoint of developing a new shift pattern, which was basically a 4-team shift pattern. So prior to that, they were on a 3-team pattern, so you had to have a team on early, a team on late, and a team on rest days. What the 4-team pattern looked to do, even though it's more expensive because you've got to put more resource into it, what the 4-team pattern looked at doing was giving identified investigation days to the detectives within those departments. That means they are protected, they're not dealing with live prisoners that are coming through the door, and it gives them the opportunity to clear the workload on their, clear the occurrences or the crimes on their workload. We implemented that in March, and that was across the whole of West Yorkshire, and we're just about to start the post-implementation review of that, which will commence next month. Part of that review looks at getting to the point that every officer has 20 occurrences or below, because that's what's deemed as a manageable level. And what we did at that time of creating the 4-team pattern was increase the staffing on adult, child and domestic abuse teams. The workloads are monitored through the Protecting Vulnerable People boards, obviously my board that I chair. When you look at it as a whole, we are either at the 20 or below across the force, which is good because it's heading in the right direction. My worry as it stands at this moment in time is domestic abuse, because that is the area for me where when you look at it as an individual team, they are still higher than where I would like it to be. So the PIR will look at that. It will also link in with Pillar 4 of Obsteria, which focused on officer and staff wellbeing. So you've got all the academic research that we've got on the back of that. So we'll do the PIR. Part of that will be staff surveys as well, which I've asked for, to get the open and honest feedback to how is the pattern landed, and is it helping their wellbeing. And obviously the key bit for me is the staffing across the safeguarding department. So the key direction that the commanders have had, they've got to be at 100% of staffing all the time, and I monitor that through the local accountability meetings. So we've just finished those last week, and I'm pleased to say they have maintained 100% staffing across those departments because we cannot afford to have any gaps. So we'll continue to monitor it, and likewise when the post-implementation review, we've got the final report, again I'm quite happy to share that with you.
Yeah, thank you. So that's reassuring, but is another way to keep alive to the issues for staff to include it in your staff survey?
Yeah, well,
specifically for those areas, safeguarding.
I should say, when we do the staff survey, they ask those specific questions, and we can break it down per department type as well, so we can then pick each area out. Because what I'm really cognizant of, I don't want to get to the point that everything is rosy within the safeguarding world, but at the same time it's trying to find that balance, that sweet spot that the Chief spoke about. I can't tip and ladle from one area and pass the problems on to somewhere else.
Yeah, and obviously when you're doing an evaluation, people might not want to say to an academic doing the evaluation what's really happening, but in a staff survey they might be more honest.
Yeah, and to be fair, to monitor those investigations days, because I've been very clear to the commanders as well that we shouldn't be abstracting those officers on those on those investigation days, and actually went to the Federation and encouraged the Federation to go out and speak to the membership and say, if you're getting your investigation day cancelled, please report it. If you feel happy to come to us, because each district has to fill out a report which comes to me if they have to cancel it. And at the moment, it's working.
Right, oh well, let's hope that it continues. At the last COM, discussions about the reductions in domestic incidents were highlighted, and we asked about the percentage decrease of domestic incidents, and you advised that due to Home Office changes you couldn't give us all that detail for a year, so we're at that year, we've just passed it, so I just wondered if you've got any update.
I'm pleased I can tell you where we are. So the issue I raised last time was obviously we couldn't compare apples with apples, we were calling it apples with pears. So when you actually look at the full 12 months, and this is to July 2024, it shows a 16.3% reduction for that 12 months, but that is apples with pears. If you then just look at the period June to August 2024 to the same period last year, which means we are comparing apples with apples, holistically across West Yorkshire we're showing a 7.8% reduction in domestic abuse. Now, all districts are showing a reduction, but it's different. Obviously, the highest reduction is Leeds at 10.7%, and the lowest reduction is within Wakefield at 4.7%. Where we're seeing the biggest reduction in crime types, it's those malicious communications offences, and that will be around the crime changing recording. And I think when you holistically look at it and take that out, we're anticipating when we've run a full year, we're probably going to look, if it continues as it is, probably about a 4% reduction. So it's a reduction, but that's still too many people suffering domestic abuse.
Yeah, and that's why we've got to keep funding things like CARA, because obviously we know that there's a 30% rate of people not going on to reoffend, and obviously that's massive.
Just go back to Damien's previous answer, that's those domestic abuse teams who are under most pressure as well, and more time, more space, more investigations would have an impact on repeats. The other point he also makes is it's a balancing act, because that's why we've not got as many people in neighbourhood policing as we used to have, or on patrol, or in other areas, because we're having to shift resources around to deal with the most harmful and most dangerous offenders.
Yeah, and obviously that's before the £18 million worth of cuts next year. So, yeah, I just thought I'd remind you, as though you needed to be reminded. Thanks very much. So that was my last question under violence against women and girls. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to organised crime, which I know that's you again.
If I can introduce
you did say Marie
Detective Superintendent Marie Bulmer, who's the West Yorkshire Police Head of Serious and Organised Crime, very experienced investigator, and we're lucky to have her. Marie.
Thank you, Chief. I think just, Deputy Mayor, just as a quick overview, obviously I know you've been cited on the report. I think just as a capture over this year's work in terms of serious and organised crime, we've got 102 mapped serious and organised crime threats across West Yorkshire, which are range in different criminalities. So we have child sexual exploitation, organised acquisitive crime, human trafficking, fraud, as well as drugs and firearm offences. So a real spread in terms of that criminality that we really look at targeting within West Yorkshire. And as you highlighted in your opening, in terms of the funding opportunities, in 23-24, we have deprived criminals of over like £10 million in assets obtained from their criminality, which then strip the profits from that serious and organised crime. We can then reinvest back into the communities within West Yorkshire. And also in terms of that, the Clearhold Bill locations, Halifax as well, now we're going to be launching their location. That's going to be launched in October time. So again, it really does demonstrate in terms of utilising the Clearhold Bill methodology, the positive impact that working in collaboration with partners can really make in that investment in an area and changing the lives of those in the communities. So I think what I've really been demonstrating over this last year is about that serious and organised crime is everyone's business and not just specific departments or just within policing, but actually we need to work collaboratively with partners, third sectors, private sectors to really bring together a whole systems approach. And it demonstrates then with our data that we are able to capture on our national system to be able to show the real positive impacts that we're making in terms of warrants, safeguarding, drugs seized, and sentences of these harmful criminals in our community. So hopefully that's been represented in the report for you.
Yes, it has, thank you. And of course I chair the board, so yeah, I'm
Yes,
excited on lots of the work that you're doing operationally. So regarding firearms, the report describes how over the past 3 years West Yorkshire has recorded a pattern of roughly 20 firearms discharges with a reduction in each district for 2023-24, except Leeds. Just wondered what your reflections were on what's different in Leeds and whether or not you're satisfied that we're doing enough to combat whatever those challenges and differences are.
Yeah, certainly Leeds has been the largest single contributor, like you pointed out, about the offences and recording the 10 discharges. As the table in the report illustrates, over the last 3 years, Leeds has roughly recorded between 8 and 10 offences each year. Other districts have had experienced flare-ups, and those have mostly been temporarily, for example, due to a short-lived crime-linked series. But Leeds recorded the greatest share of offences over the several years. And the volumes increased slightly. I think in terms of the drive in the activity, it's really difficult to pull out the concrete trends from the relatively infrequent and disparate events, but behind the current situation, serious and organised crime activity and firearms criminality remains inextricably linked with SOC, gangs and drugs. And this year's incidents may not been directly linked to those series, but there's a common thread throughout with the various MOs. One thing that we have noted, and certainly within the Leeds, has been the shift, and this I'll move on explaining about the shift in it being nationally, but there's been a shift in terms of it moving from shotguns to handgun type weapons, and indeed the discharges recently in Leeds have been from handgun type weapons, some which have been confirmed to be converted blank firers. But I think the shift in the Forces Firearms profile, looking at this shotgun based to handgun type, is well covered in terms of we manage it within the 6 weekly programme precision SOC meeting that I chair, and so that governance and strong drive is delivered through that. And we also have further meetings with our ROCU colleagues as well to be able to ensure that we've got that regional and national understanding of this sort of change to the handgun types. I think through that SOC tasking and governance as well, and the various actions, we're ensuring that we take both covert and overt policing activity. And just to offer further reassurance, we do have a dedicated firearm prevent team that works closely with my serious and organised team, crime team within protective services, so that we ensure that we effectively investigate every recorded firearm discharge, and also that we identify opportunities for the development of intelligence, and supporting not only the investigators for this, but we've also got the intelligence threat desks, and we have each district every piece of intelligence or reported incidents, and likewise with this obviously includes Leeds, ensures that we maximise any opportunity to mitigating the threat and maximise the recovery of the firearms. Just talking about the blank firing issue, as I mentioned, this has been nationally recognised now as an emerging threat and something that's been seen across the region and nationally. So I just wanted again to reassure that this is no means unique to West Yorkshire or in particular with Leeds. And again, just offer that further reassurance. When I've looked and compared us to our most similar groups within the region, it would be South Yorkshire Police. And when I have looked at that, we consistently record significantly lower number of firearm discharges in comparison to South Yorkshire Police, and we also are more favourable in terms of our recovery of weapons. And then nationally, when looking at the National Firearms Centre NABIS data and comparison to our, again, most similar groups, Greater Manchester Police and West Midlands, we are significantly have fewer discharges in comparison to those forces. So I think in terms of that multi-year trending, nationally there's been a decrease in firearm activity, and we have been ahead of this trend. I think back in 2018-19 was our significant peak in terms of firearm discharges, where we hit 52, but now, as been mentioned, we have much more stabilised now around 2023, and that's been since 2020-21. So I think, really considering, I think we are at a base level now in terms of our forces discharges expected. But please, I would like to make sure that reassurance is there, that through my governance and the forces governance and how we manage the firearms discharges, we ensure that we do mitigate any risk and threat, and obviously looking for that recovery of firearms.
Thank you. That's really comprehensive, and obviously I do know all the detail of the work that's been done on the front line, so thank you. Next, can you share an update on your progress on the recommendations from the peer review of the response to organised immigration crime, and any early feedback from HMIC the inspection that was held in April of this year?
Yeah, so we conducted obviously the peer review in relation to organised immigration crime, and an action plan was produced from the recommendations of that. The majority of that was just ensuring that there was that awareness in terms of all levels of within the force and our partners, from contact to frontline policing. And with regards, and I'm pleased to say that that's been implemented across the force, and from our review, I'm really satisfied that that's been all implemented satisfactorily. The HMIC FRS inspection has taken place now. The feedback that we was given in terms of that was very positive. I was again really happy and satisfied in terms of our response to the threat. The inspectors said that they could identify the really good work in terms of the training, the partnership working, operational activity. Only today we've got a hydro running for OIC, which we have other forces who are asking to attend in terms of our delivery on this training in this area. So the report's expected to be published later this month. I think the only sort of caveat is it's a thematic threat report, so that it'll be the recommendations of the whole thematic, so it's not just going to be West Yorkshire based. But certainly when we did the debrief with the inspectors, it was very positive, and actually no areas for us to be able to pick up on. So I look forward to seeing what the report will come with.
As do I. And then when we get the report, obviously, we like to meet with the inspectors just to pull out any learning for West Yorkshire, so I'll tell you what they say.
Sorry, on that thematic, I think it'll be a national report.
It is a national, yeah.
Without any specifics to West Yorkshire, but there will be later this year the Serious and Organised Crime HMIC inspection.
Yeah, but in previous thematic inspections, I've met with the lead inspector and got any learning for us here, which obviously I've been able to report back, and so I will do the same.
Lovely, thank you.
So the report describes some positive results against serious violence and ASB, supported by the Hotspot Response Fund. So I just wondered, we can celebrate actually some of those good outcomes, whether we could tell the public about the 20% fall in ASB in hotspot areas over the last year, the behaviour change campaign that was linked to the hotspot areas, and the type of early intervention engagement work that's taking place in these areas, because the public should know about the detail that's being undertaken.
Yeah, absolutely, and I do think it is an area, you know, for highlighting and celebrating and it's that investment and identifying the significance of when we identify the key hotspot areas for the work that's been undertaken to be able to contribute to reducing the 20% fall, like you mentioned, in the ASB area. So I think in honesty, it's too early to fully understand the holistic impact, you know, of the Hotspot Response Fund, because it's very evidence-based, and the fruits of this labour will come to fruition fully by the end of the year. I think all the serious violence crime, combining that with the antisocial behaviour hotspots, has actually shown that they interlink together. In Q1, there was an additional 20 officers who were working every day to deliver against the objectives. So this is a combined of just under 13,000 to 14,500 hours of policing dedicated to the hotspot response areas, also supported by the neighbourhood colleagues as well. So that gradual introduction of these of the officers working within those areas has resulted in 234 hotspots now being actively managed. And with that, what we've been able to do is actually visibly identify the tracking of the patrol hours within those areas, so sort of showing the compliance, and then we can get that evidence base about the impact that visibility has made. And in the first quarter, it did show and demonstrate that on an average there was a 20% reduction in incidents compared to the same time in the previous years, and that's been with nuisance incidents being the biggest driver of the reductions, demonstrating a 22% reduction. There's also been an average about 11% reduction in antisocial behaviour related crimes compared to the same time in the previous years, and it also demonstrated greater reductions than non-managed ASB. So they've had like control areas where they'll be able to sort of demonstrate the benefits of having people within the hotspot areas compared to control areas that have not had this, and it has actually shown that there's significant improvement of having the patrols in those areas. So it is an early indication that the addition and focus patrols are having that impact. And it'll be interesting as they sort of move into the third quarter again to be able to do that comparison data and be able to actually hopefully continue to show the reduction. And again, it's identifying that link between antisocial behaviour and serious violence crime as well within those localities. Just moving on in terms of the behaviour change campaign, so that's been an expansion of the previous work carried out under Project Shield. Yeah. So the new ASB campaigns have been going live on antisocial behaviour and serious violent crime hotspot areas. So what they're doing is they're running a campaign for 6 months under a randomised control trial to test and evaluate its success. And they're going to be focusing on 4 key elements. So it's building trust and confidence, increasing reporting, moving offenders away from committing offences, and increased patrols. And this work is undertaken with collaboration with the digital marketing company, so that we are utilising sponsored social media space to deliver the messaging direct to that targeted demographic. And this will be tested against control areas to understand the impact on crime and incident figures. And the areas will be similar but selected by random process to either receiving a message or not. So it'll be really interesting to see in early spring 2025 when this evaluation work can be done, to actually seeing the impact that is have of diverting any people within that locality away from criminality, from it be ASB or serious violent crime as well. So hopefully, like spring 2025, that report will be completed and we'll be able to share that then, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, good, looking forward to that, and hopefully some of the influence of the immediate justice pilot that we've rolled out, which is coterminous with this funding and this work, has also contributed. Yeah. But we shall discover or not. Yeah. Thank you. So my final question on this paper is on the work of OpGemlock to intercept illegally imported weapons that are purchased online. We've had 90 positive outcomes, which is great news in the last year. What type of weapons are being imported in this way, and what action is taking place nationally to disrupt the online sale of weapons?
Yeah, there's been a wide range of bladed articles that are being imported via the internet and coming from a variety of countries and websites. Significantly, a majority of these weapons were often legal to sell and own in private, but illegal to possess in public. But with the changes in legislation, obviously that has now made it much better for us in terms of now it's illegal to own in private or public. And the remaining sort of loophole, if you want, in terms of the zombie style knives and combat knives, that will be hopefully closed now in September in terms of those weapons being made illegal to own in private and public, so that will make it simpler to prosecute and also look at those who are selling such type of weapons in the high streets and online. As mentioned, the force has got a dedicated operation within Gemlock that's working within Land Border Command, which is the border force, to taking that proactive action within West Yorkshire. And the mapping and test purchasing of online retailers was a focus of the last operations sector, which was the National Crime Weeks of Intensification, with all forces nationally taking part. And at the time, there was only one identified online retailer within West Yorkshire, which was subject to the operation, and I'm happy to say that they are no longer trading. So any proactive work is taking place as soon as we've been able to identify through the Gemlock operation, to be able to identify who may be trading and importing the weapons coming into our force area. Nationally, there's a significant work carried out by the National Chief Police Council Lead for Knife Crime and National Working Group, and that's been instrumental in supporting the change in legislation and the work to identify those who sell weapons online. I think it's for us to identify, though, that the weapons imported overseas are difficult to map. The UK border force are trying to go to identify packaging and postmarking to really try and help identify and build that intelligence picture to prevent the weapons from coming in, so we can identify which countries are importing them in, and also how members of our community are actually identifying and locating where to get these weapons from. So that's an intelligence that's continuing to develop.
Yeah, and obviously really pleased that the supplier here in West Yorkshire is no longer operating, and I am aware that Sergeant Mark Rothery had a lot to do with that, which was really commendable, and he was very focused on that piece of work, which is brilliant.
Yes.
Led to a good outcome for us. I'm glad that the legislation is changing, although surprised at the rewarding of these suppliers by getting £10 per knife. Yep. Which is not a matter for you, but is definitely a concern for the public, but nothing we can do about that. Yeah, so we'll see how the changes impact on access to these zombie knives, etc.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I understand you're also going to present on the drug and alcohol paper. Yeah.
Yes.
So if you've got any opening comments to make.
I think just a couple really. Obviously in the report it says about how from the 1st of January this year to the 30th of June we recorded 4,572 drug offences, and whilst possession offences figures remained static, increasing in production, supply and possession with intent supply have been noted as an increase wise. And that obviously through all 5 districts creating the Combating Drugs Partnership meeting, that delivery now on the key points of breaking the supply chains and delivering treatment and recovery systems is obviously making some significant progress within West Yorkshire now.
Thank you. On page 2, you mentioned that there's an expectation that new trigger offences for drug testing on arrest were expected before the call for the general election. Which offences were expected to be included, and what impacts would there be for police and partners if this policy is returned to the new Parliament?
Yeah, unfortunately, the Home Office didn't specify the actual information on which new trigger offences would have been included. I think it's realistic to envisage that it would have been around domestic abuse and violence against women and girls, particularly when that focus has been done in this area and the funding on the previous drug testing on arrest. So it's envisaged that that's probably the areas and certainly the ones that would be resurrected again. Should this Parliament then take those, I do believe that there will be a net increase of work for police and partners, albeit it will reduce in terms of having to identify and inspect to do the authority that is now needed at the moment. That will outweigh really in terms of that increase in demand of those that will be tested, and likewise therefore the referrals that will be made through to partners for those that have tested positive. I think when we look back at certainly the pilot or the previous funding, the results increased test did clearly show a link between domestic incidents and the presence of cocaine in the suspects. So I surmise that there would be an increase in demand, but
as well as cost,
worthy,
of course,
yes,
because drug tests are very expensive.
Absolutely, yeah.
No, well, thank you for that. And obviously, again, this is something we've raised with Yvette Cooper, and I'll continue to agitate, although we'll want some additional funding for the cost of the testing kits, which are not inconsiderable.
No.
So again, on page 2, drug supply offences look to be at a much higher rate than recent years. Based on the first 6 months of 2024, the number of these offences look likely to be the highest since 2019, prior to the COVID pandemic. Can you provide us with the background to this increase?
I think, within the paper, it obviously makes reference to operational activity as a direct contributor to the increases. I think it demonstrates the proactivity of the districts and the specialist crime teams who are targeting the serious and organised criminals within West Yorkshire and using the 4P space, so within terms of the pursue, prevent, protect and prepare. And including with that is obviously drugs offences. And I do think it's a real drive that we've had within West Yorkshire under the pursue pillar, that the police activity that has led to such positive outcomes in terms of so not only the crime figures of recording, but those positive outcomes as well. So as head of SOC, I'm really happy that we have actually can demonstrate the positive work that we're doing in terms of those for the drug supplying and with intent to supply.
And I think as responsibility for district policing, holding the commanders to account, it's the one and only area I'm quite happy for them to be in the red, because the more you arrest, the more crimes that you obviously put onto the system. And you know, if you just look in simple terms, the worse it looks. But I actually think that's proactivity.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, because we can actually reduce crime by not arresting people, which I would never ever condone. We need to arrest more, and it's fantastic the work that's been done in conjunction, not only within the districts, but within our colleagues within crime as well.
Yeah, and there's a real correlation between taking out, drug suppliers in communities and satisfaction of the communities, because even when I was a counsellor, but in our casework, even now we get lots of people telling us that there's drug dealing going on and they want to see policing proactively taking those drug dealers out. So excellent.
I think we're also within that looking at from the pursue side, but then supporting that in terms of that prevention, so that we're not just making a void and a gap that somebody else can then fill. So it's actually making sure that prevention and protection work is then completed in that community where we've removed that person from. So it's hopefully for longevity then.
Yeah, and it's a linking with all the other partners, isn't it? And looking at, is this person a modern slavery victim, for example,
Yes.
And all the different tools at your disposal.
Yeah.
Moving on to page 6 of the report, partners have reported back on the successful response to June's contaminated spice incident in Bradford. So thank you for that. Can you say more about your reflections and learning points on the collaboration to reduce harm?
Yeah, I think it's something to be noted in terms of that threat posed by synthetic opioids, and given the evolving landscape of the drugs across West Yorkshire and nationally in terms of synthetic opioids. And as a result of that, through the Combating Drugs Partnership, a plan has across all partnerships was put in place to manage the risk, including making sure that an incident response plan was there to prepare for and respond to emergencies when they occur. The recent incident that happened in Bradford triggered the implementation of their local resilience plan, and that's the first time that one of the plans have been utilised in response to an event. And the reasoning behind it was the reports of a high number of non-fatal overdoses within a week period. The high volume and frequency was obviously of a concern. So as a result of the incident, the response plan was implemented, and it brought together all key partners. Actions were agreed, which ranged from appropriate harm reduction messaging, outreach work, testing on seized substances, and identifying and arresting suppliers. The learning that was taken from this was an acknowledgement about the effectiveness and the efficiency of the speed of the collaboration. So particularly when the trigger occurred over the weekend, actually everything, sort of all the wheels in motion came into place really quickly and effectively. The messaging and action was prompt, the enforcement around the likely dealers and potential substance expedited. The incident did lead to a test on our nitazine process, and we made some tweaks just in adjustments around the complexity of dealing with hazardous substances, and it's led us to continue our work around the resilience planning for nitazines and other drugs and ensuring that we're really ready for any similar nature. But on reflection, it was much better having that plan in place and everybody understood what was expected, and it could just formulate really quickly and respond.
Yeah, and it's pleasing to know that the Combating Drugs Partnership, which obviously I chair,
Yes.
was the foundation for all that partnership working, was able to make sure that everyone came together really quickly and effectively in that way. And I'm sure we've got a meeting this week, so I'm sure we'll hear more about the detail and how we can support further.
Yeah.
So thank you. On page 8, the pilot programme for officers carrying naloxone has started, which is brilliant. Can you give us any early feedback on officers' use of the treatment in cases of overdose? And also really pleased that we've all had a letter from the new policing minister urging everyone to implement a pilot of this kind. So we were early adopters, so great to see that.
Yeah, I think it's been a lot of hard work and a lot to actually get the implementation in place, but I'm really pleased that it is now in place. It went live on the 5th of August in Leeds and Wakefield. So the trial is to run for 6 months, so we'll conclude on the 5th of December, where a full report will take place there and an evaluation of this. It is really early to make the early observations in relation to this. We've got DCI Burton, who's the Director of Intelligence, has been attending to speak with SLT colleagues and to review any progress or any areas of concern at this moment in time. So I would like to just take the moment really to thank West Yorkshire Combined Authority and other partners for providing that fantastic support and assistance in providing the training and the kits necessary for the pilot to take place. The evaluation is expected to be concluded in January 2025, and like I said, because it's just a matter of a few weeks in, we're just still under that really early stages of reviewing if there's any areas or issues, and there's been nothing of note, that's been reported back at this moment in time.
Yeah. And obviously it depends on officers volunteering, and so I'm sure more people will volunteer as we move forward. And again, thanks to all the directors of public health who are funding the naloxone in their local areas, which was an important part of the partnership.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. Also on page 8, it was really concerning to hear about vapes being used as a vehicle for delivering synthetic cannabis or even opiates. Just wondered if you could give us an update on the local and national intelligence on the prevalence of this issue, and maybe we can even raise it in the Combating Drugs Board and see if we can do some work with the local authorities, because of course many young people are using vapes, aren't they?
Yeah, and I totally agree with your concerns, in particular the impact on our children in our community. Information is indicated from our Safe for Schools officers and partners in relation to the illicit vapes being a problem within schools. When we've reviewed our crimes and intelligence, the volume doesn't seem to match what the information is that we're being told in summary. So this is why we're really pushing out to raise the profile of this concern and emerging threat, and encouraging the reporting of either the crimes or the intelligence so that we can gain that knowledge of the illicit substances. The districts are proactively looking into vendors that are selling vapes, and in particular to children, so that we can take proactive action. And all districts have now purchased testing strips that are being used and issued to safer school officers, meaning that they can test vape oil suspected of containing an illicit substance much quicker. And this is really an innovative approach taken by West Yorkshire Police in response to the identified emerging threat. We do continue to deliver awareness and education sessions in the schools, and more are planned now that the schools have returned back from September to the new year. And hopefully it's hoped that the more intelligence that's received from the schools and community around suppliers of the vapes, that we'll be able to take targeted enforcement action on persons and premises. I think nationally, this is again is very similar to what we're feeling in West Yorkshire in terms of the problem is there and it's emerging in terms of that awareness of this emerging threat. But actually, even nationally, when you look, the issue is still relatively unclear, and there's a real drive nationally to be able to develop this intelligence picture. So I think we've just got to keep trying to drive that intelligence from our communities, really.
Yeah, and working with schools, I think, is going to be key.
Totally.
And clearly, you've got PolEd, which is a brilliant vehicle that you can use to develop a awareness raising course for young people, so that they're alive to the risks.
Yeah.
Not that it necessarily will stop them, but it's, you know, it's forewarned is forearmed, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I think it's a really good area for us to consider further in the Combating Drugs Partnership, to see how we can, you know, use some of the Mayor's wider convening powers to bring this to the attention of all our key partners.
Yes.
Yeah, so again, we're on the front foot.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
To introduce ACC Robert Cooper, who's in charge of operational support and ops policing.
Hello, welcome. And you're going to speak on the next two papers, which are road safety and then use of force.
I am, yep. So just to touch obviously on the first paper, the road safety paper, obviously a regular feature in this forum, which provides the updated details. Of course, it documents some concerning trends in respect of the killed and serious injury figures last year in respect of the year before. Some slight reductions in overall casualties, and obviously a positive reduction in people killed, albeit of course still way over where we would like to be in terms of our overall collective ambitions around Vision Zero. But the report does pick out a number of highlights in respect to the success of the continued investment in the camera safety partnership, the continued focus on the Fatal Five, and again some of the really good and innovative practice I know was just touched on in the last item around PolEd and some of the educational stuff we're seeking to collectively progress.
Thank you. So I'll get into the questions. So the data on e-bikes, standing scooters and electric motorcycles shows a significant upward trend. What are West Yorkshire Police doing to tackle this issue specifically? And I'd like to add on pavements as well, because we know that that's a big concern for the public. It was raised with me on REMA, BBC, and also it was one of the lead items on BBC News this morning.
Okay, I haven't seen that item, but yeah, absolutely, you're right. It's a significant issue for us. It's not unique to us. It's an issue that forces and indeed cities are seeing right across the country. We are doing a number of things to raise awareness of our officers in terms of the powers they've got to deal with these e-bikes and scooters. A lot of work's been undertaken within LNOD around developing sort of guidance, training packages, upskilling for officers so they understand the legislation that's available to them, predominantly under the Road Traffic Act, and predominantly the use of essentially no insurance and no licence offences, which apply in the vast majority of cases. So we are seeing a significant increase in the number of seizures and utilisation of those powers. To tackle this, we are equally utilising certainly our off-road bike teams in the districts that have got those, and likewise our road traffic officers with the use of motorcycles to help us sort of safely stop and deal with individuals using these. There are targeted operations certainly within Leeds and Bradford because of the city centre impact that those are having, and the MPTs locally are taking ownership for specifically targeting that activity and raising awareness. Obviously, Deputy Mayor, you're aware as well under the Vision Zero board, which you of course chair, that there's activity ongoing in the partnership space to try and come at this from not just an enforcement angle but across that partnership. And likewise internally, certainly we in West Yorkshire Police are working with corporate comms to predominantly on that awareness raising for the public, but also internally raising awareness of our officers for what we can do to sort of increase awareness and enforcement in what's quite a snaggy, difficult issue.
Yeah. And obviously I went to visit Leeds off-road bike team a couple of weeks ago. Excellent, passionate team of people, really keen to do more. They were delighted that I've got a full bike licence, although I don't think I'll ride a motorbike again in my lifetime, but we'll see. They were particularly frustrated at the fact that the bikes that they've got at their disposal meant that they couldn't always pursue offenders who were putting the public at risk. It's because of the quality of the tyres on the bikes that they've got, and I've already contracted the ACO, Catherine, to ask her to consider purchasing some higher quality bikes that they've got in other parts of the country, so that they will have access to those. I think we've currently got some in Cargate, but we haven't got them that are accessible to neighbourhood policing teams necessarily. So that's something that I think would really enhance the off-road bike team's capacity and ability to be able to give chase and, again, give that reassurance to the public, because it's definitely something that is raised with us and our complaint team. So if you could have a think about that, and I don't know if we haven't got a lot of money, I know, but sometimes using money differently is a way of getting better outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I'll pick that up and follow up with ACO Johnson as well in terms of anything that's been put in train. And it's a constant balance, isn't it, between that way off of ultimately.
But they're doing great jobs, and they've demonstrated a reduction in that crime type as a result of the work that they're doing. Yeah. But they could do more. Yeah, they say to me. Brilliant, and obviously. I think it's a partnership approach with local authorities and licensing teams about delivery bikes on pavements, and again raising awareness with police officers and others about powers that they might have to intervene when people are behaving illegally on pavements. Yeah,
and that awareness between the what are the, of course, fully legal assisted bikes up to I think 15 miles an hour when the battery kicks in, versus the ones that absolutely under the Road Traffic Act are not permissible. So we're prioritising it within the relevant departments. Yeah, we haven't had any fatals here, but in other parts of the country, of course, there have been. So let's prevent it if we can.
I think we have had, sorry, Dr. I think we've had fatals involving scooters and things.
Have we?
Yeah, with elderly people and things, So it is a growing area. And as you say, it needs that partnership approach, because legislation, road safety, local authority, is not, and our ability is not caught up with actually what's happening on the streets.
Yeah. And a lot of it's about liaising with some of those big eating establishments that will remain nameless. So on page 6, you refer to the development of a Power BI dashboard to support analysis and deployment. Have you got a time frame for this dashboard?
Yes, so we're looking for certainly the initial version of it to be up and live within 3 months. I know on previous items it's been touched on. We're obviously trying to progress in a number of areas around our digital policing and use of the digital dashboard. So this is a priority, but in a pool of a number of other things that are also a priority. So it's probably taken a little bit longer than we were hoping, but certainly within the next quarter we're hoping for a development of that to be live, and that will draw in obviously the Department of Transport data around all the crash data, which will give us a much more useful product to
and it'll be really useful for our data person on the Vision Zero board, so we get that information, better quality information in a more timely way. Thank you. So the One Life Lost module that's on POLED is really welcome. Just wondered if you've got other road safety modules, and if you haven't, what's the take-up of One Life Lost on the POLED in schools?
So I think the road safety stuff in its broadest sense is really popular and is really good take-up across the sort of POLED programme. Obviously, tend to approach it in two halves, with the sort of up to 16 years, and then some additional bolt-ons for those that are 16 and over, predominantly in the drink and drug drive. So we've got obviously the modules. We've got 14 lessons under that would be classified under road safety. As I say, there's excellent uptake. So there's been at least 20,000 children have received those inputs over sort of the best part of 750 sessions that have been delivered. There's larger assembly type inputs for the drink and drug driving, and that's for your sort of 16 and overs. And from 24 we're sort of expanding that to offer a police input which would be undertaken by ops staff around the one life lost, and that's sort of available for schools to bid in for as well. So I think they're seeing some real sort of success and traction and some good volumes through those programmes.
That just shows the power of that POLED programme that we've spoken about many times, that is designed by teachers for delivery by teachers. It's not taking up police officer time. It's from trusted adults with Ofsted compliant lesson plans. And you know, you said it there, you know, quite, and I saw that you picked up on it, you know, talking about that. So there's 14 lessons around road safety so far, and an assembly. And so since 2023, September 23, there's 733 inputs to 20,000 children without a police officer being involved. And it's, you know, that's brilliant, and it's trusted, dedicated professional teachers who are delivering those. And the assembly to post 16 has gone 10 times to 2,000 young adults. So that's how it develops and builds, and that's just one theme within POLED. You know I'm passionate about it.
Oh no, that's a great idea.
These things over the next 10 years will change the lives of a significant number of people, of young people in West Yorkshire, and it'll be over the next 20, 30 years that we'll see the benefit of that, and it's part of our commitment to that.
It's that behaviour change, isn't it? And it starts somewhere, and hopefully for lots of children it starts with POLED. And I see that we're rolling it out, and other beds have purchased it, which is, you know, really good, because they'll benefit too.
Hopefully that'll have the domino effect, yeah.
So the update on automatic number at ANPR, it's really positive. There's no mention of Vision Zero, so just wondered how it's being used to support Vision Zero. I know it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if it's read through in the report, that's definitely not intentional, because ANPR absolutely fundamentally sits at the heart of Vision Zero and everything we're trying to do around road safety, and it is utilised as well in West Yorkshire as anywhere in the country in terms of a proactive tool. The hot lists that we use in West Yorkshire have essentially resulted in practice being picked up across the rest of the country now around certainly unsafe vehicles, failed MOT vehicles, and those that have had serious defects. Those vehicles all go onto hot lists, which then flag, obviously via the NPR system, to officers who can take sort of proactive action. We've got a number of researchers then who undertake analysis and research work for NPR hot lists that we have, specifically focused around the Fatal Five and particular vehicles or individuals of interest who can then obviously be targeted for interventions if that opportunity comes up. There's some good work ongoing around the use of ANPR analysis to try and understand dangerous speeds, which then likewise will help populate those lists of dangerous vehicles. And it's also being used around, particularly linked to the antisocial use of vehicles and criminal use of vehicles. Some good innovative work going on in the force as well, specifically around identifying and addressing false number plates and cloned vehicles.
I was going to ask you about ghost plates.
Yeah. So again, some really good work going on to sort of identify where that's happening and to take action.
Yeah. So have our ANPR cameras got the capacity and capability to identify ghost plate registration numbers? And for the public, some drivers are using ghost plates, so they're using numbers that don't show up on traditional ANPR cameras. But I understand that we've got some technology that can help us to pick up the full registration documents, and it's possibly people who've been banned who are using them, so that you can't track them using the cars, for example. But serious and organised criminals are definitely using ghost plates.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're continuing to invest in the technology to stay ahead of those techniques that are being used by criminals, and again, a really sort of quite a robust national infrastructure that sits behind our local approach, so that we're constantly reviewing the technology and the techniques to try and keep ahead of those.
I suspect nationally they're not as far advanced, because I did raise it at the APCC and not many people knew what I was talking about. So
no, we're quite I'd say we are very at the forefront of ANPR practice nationally in West Yorkshire.
I got that impression.
Yeah.
No, good, and obviously we'll keep a a watchful eye on that, especially as it relates to the Vision Zero strategy.
Yeah.
In Bradford, the update states that proposals for a Vision Zero board were taken to the Community Safety Partnership in March. Do you know what the current position is on this? And also the name on the paper is somebody who's now left.
Yeah, that individual, yeah, who has, you're right, is now left. So there's a paper has been submitted to the Bradford Council around combining the existing upstairs side board and the newly established road safety board into a single board, essentially, to undertake the sort of ambitions of Vision Zero, the partnership board, which will then sit as a subgroup to the CSP, essentially.
That's good.
Slight governance complexities to get over in Bradford in terms of elected membership thematics that sit across ASB and road safety separately, but they're working through that, they're aware, and updated that that's being resolved within the Bradford partnership.
Good, and obviously I'll raise that with the leader of Bradford because I meet them all regularly,
Yeah.
so just to make sure that that's still happening and any progress that we can make we'll support if possible. Thank you very much. So we'll move on then to the final formal paper, the use of force.
Yeah, okay, so just obviously the details in the paper which I won't cover, other than to say it continues to be a real focus of within West Yorkshire Police to sort of understand how we're using force. The paper obviously points out the positive trend data in respect of the reduced use of invasive and impactive tactics in terms of force used, and obviously significant numbers of reviews ongoing around use of force on a monthly basis, and then subsequent follow-up action as a consequence of those reviews. So I think that's all in opening I would say about the report.
Thank you. We know that many interactions involving use of force are filmed and shared quickly across social media platforms by the public or people involved in some criminal activity, not always of course, and that this can impact trust and confidence here in the county, irrespective of where the incident's taken place. What assurances can you offer about use of force across West Yorkshire generally, in terms of the governance around that? I mean, obviously this paper is proof positive of that, but anything additional to the paper that the public might be interested in?
And you're quite right. We're seeing it more and more now, where things are going viral on various social media platforms. Sometimes with a partial snapshot of the incident and not the full context. Sometimes the opposite of that. We do have a robust way of monitoring social media and picking up anything that's happening, certainly in West Yorkshire. Comes sort of quite quickly to the attention of either the force incident manager or a member of a local SLT. That would have a process of quickly escalating into the force gold commander, that ordinarily would sit at sort of ACC level. First actions obviously around reviewing the use of force, considering getting out any press lines initially to manage sort of public confidence and expectations. We do undertake the dip sampling and reviews with subject matter experts specific around whether it's taser, handcuffing, whatever the particular use of force would be. We recognise the need to take sort of quick and robust action if there is any what appears to be an appropriate use of force, and we have demonstrated that recently in the force, and indeed officers have been dismissed in the recent past when we've had just that, things going viral where use of force is used, it's reviewed, we're not happy with it, officers subsequently suspended, professional standards processes invoked, and consequently criminal proceedings followed, and indeed dismissal. So we have seen examples of that in recent times in West Yorkshire. Very rare, thankfully, but I can give confidence that there is that overarching scrutiny around our force. Lots of dip sampling, lots of review of body worn footage, various layers of supervision engaged in that process. And then obviously an element of independent scrutiny brought by the local IAGs, where again we bring cases where force is used and welcome those sorts of independent views.
And I actually attended the IAG in Elland Road and saw how it works and how use of force was reviewed by that panel. I have to say that it's probably not regular, but the case that we watched, the officer actually had brilliant banter with the person that the use of force was used again. It was a really nice interaction, and then he put handcuffs on this 14-year-old child. And then there was no use of force form completed, which was the disappointing bit, because we didn't understand as a scrutiny, as an IAG, why the handcuffs had been applied. I'm sure there was some history background, but we were not able to see that because the use of force form was not there. And it was a child, so it was very disappointing. But, you know, I'm sure that's...
Yeah, and that's exactly what those IAGs are for, aren't they? And that messages filter out and through, and there'll be reviews of those cases. We're now in a position where there's about a third of stop and search involves the use of handcuffing. That doesn't mean it's inappropriate necessarily. There might be on occasion, and we believe that that's consistent with other forces who measure it. We know there's plenty of other forces who don't know what their statistics are, and part of our quite right issues are that we're very upfront with the HMIC, with the scrutineers, with everybody involved as to what we're doing. We've got a huge piece of work ongoing again about refreshing officers around that use of handcuffing, because like you, I'm most concerned around young people and where the justification is not met. That's good to see the IAGs, and good to see that their process is working.
Oh yeah, they were very tough. The IAG was very tough with the the officers there, and I thought that it was a really good example of people power. So it was good. But obviously, on page 5, you see that the use of force forms are in the high 60s, low 70s, and that's got to. I know there's some information given about the steps taken to improve that, but I think the two things go hand in hand, don't they? That if you're going to use force, you've got to have the form, and then the governance around that. So the line managers have got to be really on it when officers are not completing those forms.
Yeah, I think we'll have to check on this. I think this is part of the previous issues, that there's a complexity between whether they're doing them in custody when they arrest people and it's on the custody record, or whether it's a standalone because there's no arrest. That doesn't mean only 60% of use of force has a use of force form. Actually, it's far higher, but it's often done on the custody system, and we're just trying to unpick that because it's not helping with our data returns and presents probably an unfair picture, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that wasn't said in the IAG either. This was a young person being arrested in their own home, so I'm not asking you to comment on that one, it's just an example, but I think that's definitely something that would help the public have more trust and confidence if there was an alignment between the use of force and then the forms used, so people can understand. But if it's actually much higher, then it's an own goal, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, and that's what I'm saying. I think it absolutely is, and the HMI understand that, but that's part of our data issues that we've got to get that right, because it's absolutely without question, whenever force is used, there has got to be a form, end of. Right.
Yeah, absolutely, and just to reassure as well, a lot of work ongoing as well to enhance and maximise the opportunity around those IAG reviews, and making sure that we're getting the right sort of cases to maximise the learning and bring random dip samples, but also other cases.
There were some really good ones there.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's really encouraging to hear.
Yeah. So it was good. Things to learn from both of them, from the ones we saw. It was good.
Yeah.
Can you say more about how use of force may differ or appear to differ when officers are carrying firearms?
I mean, obviously, they're very highly trained officers, selected on the basis of sort of good communication skills because of the nature of the role. Significant sort of risk in terms of them having to manage issues that ordinary sort of normal patrol officers don't have in terms of kit retention, because of the obvious risks of losing firearm or potentially lethal weapon. But they do utilise a full-scale RF tactics, so that's anything when deployed in an armed capacity, from very discrete armed inquiries, which would be very low-key and unimpactful, right through to sort of very high-end loud and impactful tactics to sort of try and deal with sort of and mitigate higher threat, essentially. So So they're absolutely local front-facing officers, but it's just the different dynamics in terms of the kit that they have to deal with and retain, and then some of the obviously much higher threats at times they've got to sort of try and mitigate. So there is a different feel when firearms officers are deployed in context.
Yeah, and I suppose just to help you along. I did see a video a couple of years ago where it looked like a member of the public was being, the use of force against a member of the public was disproportionate, but actually the officers who were who were using force were armed officers, and when we unpicked it all, the person being arrested was trying to get the gun off one of the officers, and so obviously it appeared that the use of force was disproportionate, but the impact of not getting that person under control was that person got the gun, and that would have been a disaster, wouldn't it? So I suppose from a public's perspective, they need to understand that there's a risk assessment that takes place when you're arresting someone, and if you've got a gun, you've got to stop that person getting one. But also the intelligence might be that the person you're arresting has also got access to a gun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're incredibly lucky in this country that the vast majority of our officers aren't armed, but we obviously need to have that capability that can deal with the most dangerous level of threat also. So
and obviously in this instance I was able to see the footage from beginning to end. The intelligence was that person was armed. That's why there were armed officers in attendance, which was one of the criticisms of the public, that they didn't understand that there'd been intelligence to that effect, and that's why officers with guns were there, because you wouldn't normally see that, thankfully.
So firearms officers are more limited in their use of open hand skills and personal contact when they're arresting people, because the risk of access to their firearms, to their sidearm, is greater, which is what you're alluding to.
Yes.
So therefore, on occasions, they will move to a more overt, compliant-based approach to it. Having said that, the interesting bit, well, 3 or 4 years ago, when we first started delving even deeper into the use of force and disproportionality into the use of force, across West Yorkshire, when we looked at all of our use of force across all elements of it, and then compared the individuals using that force, there was far less disproportionality against black, Asian and minority ethnic groups by the firearms officers in West Yorkshire than anybody else. And when we dug into that and started trying to explore that, there was a logical explanation given, which I can understand and subscribe to. The firearms officers are so highly trained against mitigating the threat, firearms, knives, weapons, machetes, their NDM processes, national decision making, and threat minimisation processes, the firearms process, is wholly and utterly focused on that, to the extent that on occasions any unconscious bias might be mitigated, which was possibly, in some people's views, including some of the police, and the other way around, how people perceived it to be. Hence why we ended up with the cultural awareness programme as one of the themes around educating and helping people. So I'm not saying that there won't be firearms officers who exhibit discriminatory behaviour, of course there will be. But it's just interesting that the high training and professionalism, it's all upon weapons, knives, guns, machetes, firearms, and that's what they see as much as anything else around them. So I mean, that was fascinating, because there was very little disproportionality against black people or Asian people in the use of force by firearms officers, but there was greater disproportionality by others. Sorry, long explanation.
No, but maybe there's some learning for that, for the general, for the more general training, and
because I don't
you focus on the risk, not on the bias.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
So, no, but that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's something that's pertains elsewhere nationally. So I'll take that to the APCC and have a think about it. Thank you. So page 4 of the report talks about the enhanced scrutiny of the police use of force and the increased transparency, and I presume that's partly about the IAGs, etc. that we've already talked about. Can you say more about any changes to policy and training that's resulted from this feedback?
Yeah, so I think we've obviously touched on elements in the previous discussions we've been having there around elements of this, but in essence, a much more increased and enhanced understanding around use of force in a general sense across the across West Yorkshire Police, led by the Chief, through our senior leadership forums into all the various groups that we run. So there's been a real focus on it. We've had a gold group running within the force to understand and progress it over the last couple of years. We're looking at our internal governance now in terms of how we move that to the next step. You know, in terms of our training, we've doubled the amount of training now that officers get on their PPST. That's now 2 full days.
What's PPST?
Sorry, it's the
personal and public safety
yeah.
training. So it's about safety of the public and safety of the officer as well. It used to just be officer safety training, but we've moved it into, it's about public safety and personal safety for the officers.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's a test there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll have a good acronym, so apologies for that. But it's yeah. So in essence, the second day, which is predominantly fully scenario based, all underpinned by academic learning, to really draw out those considerations so that officers are really clear on what they're doing and why, and can justify it. You know, to take as an example, you know, we brought in an awful lot of new policy around our taser review. So every time there's a use of taser, we've got sort of significant layers of review in respect of that, both at a senior level, but also at a specialist practitioner level. That then results in a range from feedback to the officer right through to removal of permit if we're not happy with the use of that force, and we've seen that recently on a number of occasions. So so there's a number of things ongoing to sort of make sure that we're digging into and understanding the force, and making sure that we're constantly learning, and that feedback is there, and if needs be, tipping into misconduct, as we've said, which has happened as well.
Yeah. So if you're withdrawing people's permits to hold tasers, for example, are you then reflecting on the process for giving people permits in the first place? Because clearly you made a mistake at some point, didn't you?
Well, so we've got a taser steering group which oversees the issuance and training and the risk assessment around how we deploy taser across the force. And part of the review process feeds into that forum to then pick up, are there needs to change the approach to training, the scenarios they're given, and again reflect on the skills we're looking for an officer to be an effective taser officer. So all those things do get considered with a view to making sure that we've got the right people using the taser in the right way.
Yeah.
A bit like a driving licence, though. You can pass the test at the beginning, but if you don't comply with the rules of the road, you'll have it taken off you. So it's the same with these. We do, of course, assess and make sure we've got the right people doing it. They get the training, they pass the tests as they do. They might have been retrained 2 or 3 times, they get accredited. If they choose to use it outside of policy, then that's where it'll get withdrawn.
Yeah, although I hope it's more attitudinal based, your taser. It's not just about passing the exam, it's also about testing people's attitudes to given scenarios, whereas, you know, the driving licence, it's when do you beep your horn? Is it between 10 p.m? You know, that's one I kept on failing on. But anyway, I passed it in first time, but it let me off with that one for some reason. So yeah, so it is about your attitude, isn't it? And it's how do you test for that?
Yeah, and ultimately justification for the use of that, which is an extremely effective tool and is used very routinely to keep people safe in West Yorkshire, but it's just about that proportionate considered use.
So it's hard to test for the attitude they do. The main element of it is supervisor endorsement and peer endorsement, so the supervisors are saying they're an appropriate person to go into the training in the first place. Because you're right, it is about, you know, we want the right people. Having said that, if they were failing the aptitude test for that, they were failing
the aptitude test for the force, definitely. So anyway, just opportunities for learning, isn't it? Definitely. Always. So pages 4 and 5 talk about compliance with use of force reporting, and I welcome all the work on this today. Wondered if you could explain a little bit more about the move from encourage and explain to educate and enforce.
Yeah, I think essentially that's just describing a bit of a change in posture, really. Again, touching on some of the things we've talked about already, but just being really clear, you know, at all layers of the organisation, the importance of considered use of force, using it appropriately, not going beyond, and using our powers in an appropriate way. Those different layers of review, scrutiny, and trying to engage supervisors at all level around that reflective review on regular one-to-ones. We've got processes now that we do consider if officers, for example, are receiving repeated complaints for excessive use of force, for example, that will now feature in local professional standards health checks, which will then result in professional discussions with officers and feedback. As part of the DIP sampling process, certainly all our student officers who are working alongside the central assessment unit will get feedback around there when body-worn cameras are reviewed in respect of how they're using force. So it's multi-layered, but ultimately there's a real clear posture within the force now around people needing to be in a position to justify their professional use of force, and that is resulting in more officers being on reflective to formal development plans, and as opposed to just a more sort of informal approach to it.
No, that's good to hear. So in respect of use of force in custody, looking at the June to June reporting year, can you explain about the overall increase from 4,565 to 5,207, and what percentage were children? The increase in handcuffing from 2,094 to 4,578, and again the percentage that were children, and finally the prone face down hold, and what percentage were children?
Yeah, so I think the increased numbers are, I think there's a positive in so much as we've seen more custody records and more people through custody, which is obviously aligning with a number of our other ambitions around improving criminal justice outcomes for victims and our priorities there. So actually, when you look at the percentages of force used, they're comparable year on year. So 9.2% of cases through custody resulted in a use of force in 22-23. That's 9.9 in the subsequent year. So comparable levels, just more people through the system, if you like, but no notable change there. In terms of the use of force on juveniles, then, so it's 7.08% of uses of force in 2023-24 were on juveniles. That is slightly below the rate of custody records for juveniles, which is at 7.4. So a slightly, albeit marginal, less use of force on juveniles than in the broader population of people through custody. But I say marginally lower percentage. And then likewise that does translate through in terms of the use of handcuffs, so 7.16% of handcuff use and 7.14% of prone restraint use on juveniles in custody. So those sort of percentages follow through in a way that you would expect, and whilst not significantly less amounts of use of force on juveniles in custody, they are lower than use of force on adults.
Sometimes it's helpful to give the numbers. So there's 5,207 people under 18 arrested and 369. There was a requirement to use force for either their safety or for the safety of other people there. And then, as Rob says, percentage-wise, that's 7% of force used against young people as opposed to 9% for the whole population. And we would, of course, expect and want it to be that way and want it to be lower. Because just human assumption on it. Sorry, Rob.
No, I think that covers it.
And I just wondered how reliable the handcuffs used data was, because we've already heard that people using handcuffs out in the community and then coming into custody, there isn't always the proper recording of when the handcuffs are put on, and it gets doubly recorded or it gets recorded in the wrong place.
You're right, and so,
I often am.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. And the so absolutely. So we've ended up with probably an over-recording of handcuffs in custody. We've been pushing it for the right reasons, but there's some work to do locally and making the sort of reporting form more suitable so that we remove that anomaly. Because
well, we've been told it's already been removed.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly yes, it's part of the form, but which basically only gives one option for the. So what was happening previously is that you'd have someone handcuffed prior to custody, and then when they're booked in, that being recorded in custody as an application of handcuffs within custody, which it's one application of handcuffs being counted twice, which is what you've obviously...
Yeah, in the appeal feedback, we were told that that had been picked up and you could only now record it once, so that would help to cleanse the data going forward. So I look forward to a big reduction next time.
Hopefully we'll see...
Well, in a year's time, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously the prone restraint is nearly doubled. So again, just an area to be aware of, because, you know, deaths can follow from holding people under restraint in that way. So, you know, that'd be a good one to see coming down. But I understand that sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah.
Pages 6 and 7 talk more about use of force reviews, which includes the number of reviews required, the outcomes and the average time taken to complete. Whilst I welcome that there were no reviews based on areas of significant concern or injury, how sure are you that the information is accurate, and how can we be fully reassured that this has not happened, rather than an issue with officers not recording or people coming forward with a complaint?
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to be in a position where we could obviously review every use of force. That's just not possible due to the volumes. We are fortunate, though, in 2024, in that the body-worn video that has been pushed for some time is we've got high levels of compliance of that use, so we've got sort of really useful objective data in most cases that we can look at and assess around use of force. We've obviously got the well-documented processes around when people come into custody. If there's any injuries, we document and record those. So the review process there is talking about when we've undertaken a review, there's none of those reviews that have resulted in serious concern or serious injury. We have obviously had incidents. I gave an example earlier of when we've identified an officer inappropriately using force. You know, that has been addressed and the officer has been removed from the organisation. So it's not to say that when those situations aren't addressed, they're not dealt with in that way and appropriately progressed. It's just through the process that we're talking about here. We haven't identified any serious cases through that particular process, but in over a third of those cases there are essentially learning reviews and feedback and further action taken as a result of the review and what's been found. So it's I think 33% in total that does result in that sort of further proactive action to make sure that the officers are learning and getting that feedback.
Yeah, and hopefully that number will come down as the learning kicks in and the behaviours, you know, change from the minority, of course, because the majority, there aren't any issues. We understand that. Yeah.
No, we're obviously asking officers to do a difficult job in difficult circumstances, exactly. and so it's about balance and raising awareness and making sure that force that's used is only that's necessary to deal with what's in front of them.
Yeah.
And just that last bit of the question, if I heard it right, about officers not recording people making complaints. If that complainant came forward and came to the police and it was established that an officer hadn't used the body worn, they'd be disciplined. It's very clear that every interaction with the public needs to be recorded. And that's where the stance in a lot of these things is now changing from not asking and reminding people, to use your body worn. No, you know that you should have had it on. Unless you can prove to us it was broken or not working, that's a disciplinary offence for that very reason. And I think Rob's alluded to, I think we're in a wholly better place than we've ever been before now, that it is natural for frontline officers to be utilising their body worn in all interactions with the public.
Yeah, and we saw in the data that the compliance is very high, so which is good for trust and confidence, isn't it, with the police? And it's something that we always tell the public is a defence that they have should they feel that anything unfair has happened, that they can always call on the body worn video.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. Hope that wasn't a baptism of fire.
It wasn't. I've done it before actually a few months ago, so it's good.
Yeah. Good, thank you. Item 10 is future agenda items. So next time we're going to be talking hate crime, safeguarding of adults, neighbourhood policing and antisocial behaviour, stop and search, and the exception paper will be dangerous dogs. And we'll also be asking a few questions that we're going to be co-producing with the people of Hare Hills into the disturbance in Hare Hills. I think we've agreed 4 or 5 questions just to check in what we've learned so far and anything that we'd like to share with the public at that point. Any questions on the papers that are coming next time?
No.
Thank you. And obviously you can talk to the team about any of the details. Any other business?
No, thank you.
Yeah, none from us. So the next meeting is Tuesday the 26th of November, 2:30, and we'll find out where nearer the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.